Let me now turn to the situation in Syria. Syria today, Mr. Chairman, is a geopolitical Chernobyl, spewing instability and extremism over the region and the rest of the world. Like a nuclear disaster, the fallout from the meltdown of Syria threatens to be with us for decades, and the longer it is permitted to continue, the more severe the damage will be. It is frequently said that there is no military solution to Syria or the other conflicts roiling the Middle East. This may be true, but it is also misleading. For in every case, if there is to be any hope of a political settlement, a certain military and security context is required, and that context will not materialize on its own. We and our partners need to facilitate it, and over the past 4 years, we have not done so. It has been clear from early on in Syria that the desired context requires the development of capable, moderate Sunni Arab ground forces. Such Sunni elements are critical for any objective one might have in Syria: defeating extremists like ISIS, changing the momentum on the battlefield, negotiated settlement, and upholding that agreement while keeping ISIS down. Unfortunately, we are no closer today to having that Sunni force than we were a year ago, or when support for such forces was first considered several years ago. The central problem in Syria is that Sunni Arabs will not be willing partners against the Islamic State unless we commit to protect them and the broader Syrian population against all enemies, not just ISIS. That means protecting them from the unrestricted warfare being waged against them by Bashar al-Assad, especially by his Air Force and its use of barrel bombs. This, not ISIS, has been the primary source of civilian casualties. It has also been a principal driver of the radicalization fueling ISIS and the refugee crisis. The problems in Syria cannot be quickly resolved, but there are actions the U.S. and only the U.S. can take that would make a difference. We could, for example, tell Assad that the use of barrel bombs must end, and that if they continue, we will stop the Syrian Air Force from flying. We have that capability. This would not end the humanitarian crisis in Syria, or end the broader war, or bring about the collapse of the Assad regime. But it would remove a particularly vicious weapon from Assad's arsenal. It would demonstrate that the United States is willing to stand against Assad. And it would show the Syrian people that we can do what the Islamic State cannot: provide them with a measure of protection. I would also support the establishment of enclaves in Syria protected by coalition air power, where a moderate Sunni force is supported and where additional forces could be trained, internally displaced persons could find refuge, and the Syrian opposition could organize. Now, no one is more conscious of the costs of military intervention or of the limits of our military power than I am. As commander in Iraq and then Afghanistan during the height of combat in those countries, I wrote more letters of condolence to parents of America's sons and daughters than any of my contemporaries. I do not make recommendations for any kind of military action lightly. But inaction can also carry profound risks and costs for our national security. We see that clearly today in Syria, and Russia's recent military escalation in Syria is a further reminder that when the U.S. does not take the initiative, others will fill the vacuum, often in ways that are harmful to our interests. Russia's actions to bolster Assad increase the imperative of support for the moderate opposition and Syrian civilians. We should not allow Russia to push us into coalition with Assad, which appears to be President Putin's intention. While we should not rush to oust Assad without an understanding of what will follow him, Assad cannot be part of the solution in Syria. He is, after all, the individual seen by Sunnis across the region as responsible for the deaths of some 250,000 Syrians, the displacement of well over a third of Syria's population, and the destruction of many of Syria's once thriving communities.